Balmoral's silence is never empty, it is the kind that absorbs ultimatums. Behind those doors a single phrase is stalking the corridors of power, the nuclear option. Not a new title stripped, not a polite step back, but a clean, surgical cut, total exclusion of the Duke of York and Sarah, Duchess of York, from the living organism of the royal family, not only from public duty but from the private hearth as well. The logic is brutal in its simplicity. The Crown cannot preach standards while tolerating the shadow of Jeffrey Epstein at the edge of family gatherings. The counter-logic is just as cold: corner a prince who has nothing left to lose, and he may do the one thing a palace cannot control, right? That is the nightmare warning now sitting on the king's desk like a lit match. Push Andrew too far, and he could deliver a tell-all more explosive than his nephew's spare. This isn't theatre, it's triage. The York story has been poisoning the bloodstream for years. There was the friendship that did not end when it should have, the photographs that never stopped circulating, the Newsnight interview that turned explanation into catastrophe, the titles returned, the patronages surrendered, the long slow fade into seclusion that never quite finished fading. Then the settlement in the Virginia Giuffre case, denial on paper, payment in reality, reputation in ruins. And whenever the family tries to seal the wound, something rips it open again. A resurfaced email, an unwise phrase, a tone-deaf loyalty displayed at precisely the worst moment. The latest spark came from Sarah Ferguson's inbox, where words no one can defend, supreme friend, were attached to a name the public will never forgive. 7 charities wanted distance in hours, not days. The old flames roared back to life. Inside the palace the arithmetic is savage. Keep the door ajar and critics call it hypocrisy. Bolt it shut and you invite vengeance in hardcover. Richard Kay's warning lands like a gavel: exile may not bring closure, it may bring a book. Imagine the pitch: a son of the late Queen, present in rooms where history whispered, telling his version of a half-century under the velvet weight of the crown. Imagine the chapters on crisis management, on who argued for mercy and who demanded the axe, on private conversations with a monarch whose discretion was her armor. Spare hurt because it was intimate and contemporary. An Andrew memoir could hurt because it is archival: names, dates, decisions, and the institutional nervous system laid bare by someone who sat close to its heart. And unlike Harry's bid for independence, this narrative would carry the sulfur of a man already disgraced, writing not to explain a departure but to detonate a verdict. Yet the status quo is untenable. The monarchy has learned the hard way that half measures breed whole scandals. If Andrew appears anywhere near a royal door, the event becomes about him. If Sarah's name touches a palace caption, the comments turn radioactive. The brand corrodes not by dramatic collapse but by daily drip. One awkward photo here, one raised eyebrow there, and suddenly trust has a hole you can't patch. The King's project, a leaner, cleaner crown, cannot coexist with a permanent York question mark floating in every frame. One can hear William's doctrine in the subtext: the only sustainable line is the red one. So the scenario planning begins. What does total exclusion actually mean? It means the invitations stop arriving, not only for balcony moments and church services on camera, but for the unphotographed rites that define family. No country house weekends that can leak, no summer lunches that turn into sightings, no seasonal proximity that tabloids can inflate into rehabilitation. It means the private courtesies that signal forgiveness are replaced by private distance that signals resolve. It is not a legal sentence, it is a social seal, and it is severe. The humanitarian math is ugly, but the institutional math is worse. A few bruised feelings weigh less than a broken compact with the public. And yet there is that match on the desk. What might a worse than spare actually contain? Not salacious fiction, the palace can outlast gossip, but process, the one thing it protects most. Who wrote which lines in which statements? Which courtiers argued for what strategy when the Newsnight tape aired and donors began to flinch? How money moved to facilitate settlements and who nodded at which number? Which relatives pleaded for compassion and which for containment? Even the dry skeleton of procedure becomes scandalous when animated by a bitter pen. A son of a sovereign can open cupboards no publisher would dare with a lesser surname. That is the leverage Andrew holds whether the palace admits it or not. What, then, is the way through? It looks like a corridor so narrow it can only be walked single file. First, lock in principles and make them visible. There is no public role, now or ever. There are no patronages to return. There will be no soft focus rebrand. Second, make the private perimeter consistent and quiet. Minimal contact, strictly personal when unavoidable, never photogenic. Third, deny the oxygen a vengeful memoir needs. Deprive it of the pretext of cruelty by maintaining humane formalities at a distance, not invitations, not intimacy, but civility. Fourth, build a louder signal elsewhere. Flood the calendar with tangible service so that the York echo is drowned by work people can touch: early years, mental health, cost of living relief, veterans, emergency services, the unglamorous seams that hold the country together. Even this carries risk. Exiles write because silence makes them itch. But the palace has one advantage Harry never granted it: time. The news cycle punishes heat more than chill. If the institution keeps its own temperature low, the public grows bored of outrage. The only unacceptable variable is relapse, a creeping return disguised as reconciliation. Any backslide and the audience decides the monarchy's ethics are a costume, not a code. That judgment is terminal. Meanwhile, pressure points throb. Donors do not want their names next to old headlines. International partners perform due diligence on optics as if it were law. The king's reforming instincts slim down, professionalize, cut ceremony where it becomes self-parody, collide with the oldest truth in dynasties: your family is your risk. A sovereign can't choose his brother. He can choose whether the brother's shadow falls across the crown. And Sarah? The calculation is even colder. She is not a working royal, she is a vector. Every reappearance, however accidental, draws the lens back to Epstein. The phrase supreme friend is a bell that cannot be UN rung. Charities taught the palace the correct response in real time: step away, and step away fast. Whatever private sympathies may exist, the public policy writes itself: zero integration, zero optics, zero confusion. If she wishes to rebuild, she must do it outside the royal frame and far from its microphones. The nightmare chapter, the memoir, still hangs over all of this like weather. The palace cannot ban a book. It can only change its temperature by removing drama from the environment around it. A manuscript rages. A monarchy that refuses the fight denies it an enemy. Lawyers can swat facts, only discipline can starve narrative. And if the worst happens and a York volume arrives with a marketing plan and an international tour, then the countermove is not a rebuttal, it is a refusal to be cast as a character. No television sit-downs, no point-by-point amplifications, no oxygen. A crown survives not by winning arguments but by refusing to live inside them. So the king must decide whether to cut for the institution and risk the book, or hedge for the book and bleed the institution. There is no painless path. But there is a true one, and the public recognizes it at a glance, one standard that does not melt under heat. Exile will be called cruel by those who prefer the soap opera to end with hugs. It will be called overdue by those who have watched patience mutate into permissiveness. It will be called inevitable by history, which always writes the same verdict on scandals: delay is the accomplice. Somewhere in a quiet room the draft lines are being weighed for weight and weatherproofing. Words like final, permanent, and full are too sharp. Words like clarity, consistency, and focus carry the same meaning with fewer headlines. The names that don't appear in the court circular will speak louder than any sentence. The doors that do not open will be the real statement. And the family, the private people trapped inside the public noun, will hate it, because life will feel smaller. But the crown will live, because its boundaries will be legible again. If there is mercy left, let it be the kind that does not counterfeit reconciliation: a polite nod at a funeral, a handwritten card at Christmas, an unpublicized courtesy that signals civilization, not approval. Let the rest be silence. Let the oxygen go to those who can breathe without choking the brand. Let the next 12 months be a test of stamina in service, not stamina in scandal. The nuclear option is not about anger, it is about hygiene. And the warning about a book is not a reason to surrender, it is a reason to be meticulous. If Andrew chooses to publish, he will do so whether the door is ajar or bolted. If he does not, it will be because the market for his grievance went cold, not because the palace fed it with fresh drama. The institution cannot control the pen. It can control the frame. History will call this moment by whatever phrase the briefers finally settle on: streamlining, consolidation, modernization. The public will translate it in an instant. The line was drawn. And if, after the dust settles, a shop window in a small town hangs a new early years center sign, a veterans hub opens its doors, a youth program posts a waiting list, the monarchy will have bought itself the only currency that matters now: usefulness louder than noise. The rest, the whispers, the threats, the memoirs that may or may not materialize, will be background to a crown that remembered what it exists to do and did it without flinching.